Welcome back, everybody, to the RacePlazaMedia podcast. My name is Milan.
My name is Pia.
And today I'm feeling a little hungover.
Yes.
And the reason for that is
because we watched a lot of racing this weekend, including, especially you, watched the full 24-hour race at Le Mans. I took a 4.5-hour break to
I think I took
sleep.
a 30-minute sitting nap
Yes.
that I have no recollection of. I think it was 30 minutes.
Yeah,
I don't know. It happened in
fair.
the middle of the night.
Yeah.
The
Our
coffee-
night,
yes.
their day.
The
But
coffee
yes.
didn't help. But yes, we did watch a lot of racing, including essentially all of the 24-hour Le Mans race. We watched F1 in Canada, as well as F1 Academy in Canada. And of
Correct.
course, because the FIA hates us, they had to plan all of that on the same weekend. And then this was also the weekend where the F1 Academy got an extra race
Yeah,
to
they
make
had
up
three
that
races.
make up that race from Miami. So it was a lot.
Yes.
But we made it.
We did. And it was a mixed weekend of racing.
I agree with
So
that.
we're going to kick it off with Le Mans because it was the first thing that we watched and the biggest chunk, but I don't think it'll be that much chatting about.
I mean, I think there is a little bit.
Yes.
I originally had plans on taking notes, but then I was like, whatever. And I was also blue skying. I
Yes.
don't know how you call that.
I don't know.
But I was like, okay, I guess there's some notes. But then I don't think even I tweeted or skied anything at the end. Because
Fair.
I was like, I'm out of it.
Yeah.
But I did wanted to talk really quickly about the starting grid.
Yes.
Especially because in the in the hypercar category, we had a Cadillac lockout in the front.
That's
very,
true.
very surprising. The Hertz team, Joda, the Cadillac team, actually was able to qualify in P1 and P2, which was absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
Also very surprising.
Yes.
Because I did expect the Ferraris to be in the front due to them have been doing really, really well in the WEC.
Or, as we just recently learned, some people call it WEC,
Which is whack.
which is 100% whack, which I'm against. So
Yeah.
don't you ever dare call it WEC.
Yes, so they started from the top two, and then we had the number 5 Porsche Penske in third place, and then we had the BMW, the number 15 car, and then starting from 5th place, we had actually sorry, got in the highest scoring. Highest qualifying Ferrari was actually in 7th place, which was the number 50.
Yes.
With Fuoco qualifying in 7th, which was very, very surprising. I definitely thought we would have them in the top 5 at least. But of course, in a 24-hour race, there's a lot that can happen.
So in case somebody who's listening or watching this video has never watched an endurance race, so the one at Le Mans is legendary.
Yes.
It's been around since the 1920s.
It is, I think this was 93 third edition.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like we're getting close to the 100th
Yeah.
anniversary. And then the cool thing about it is it's literally 24 hours of racing, nonstop racing. There's no breaks in between. They do driver changes and there's different rules, but we won't get into that at this point right now. The cool thing is also they have 3 different vehicle categories, which makes it so interesting. They have the hypercar, which is the top fastest car category. Then they have the LMP2, so the Le Mans Prototype 2s. And then they have the LMGT3, which is the Le Mans Grand Touring 3 category.
Yeah, which are just like GT3s, like
Which
Ferraris,
is sports cars.
Porsche,
Yeah, exactly.
Cadillacs. You see all of those. And they look like road cars,
Yes.
but there are like essentially racing editions
Exactly.
of those.
But the cool thing is they all race on the same track. They do a rolling start in their categories. But then as the race progresses, I think within 30 minutes, the hypercars caught up to the LMGT3s. And then it gets even more interesting because they have to go through traffic for every single lap. And of course, you do have to make way if you're in a lower category, but you also don't want to compromise your race.
Yes,
So
correct.
there's also there's traffic, which can hurt either or any of the categories, and then there's also just risk of hitting somebody or
Absolutely.
causing a collision, which has happened many a times.
Yeah, of course.
But that's one of the things that makes it so interesting, and it's also because of, as I learned during this 24-hour race, due to Audi's progression in the 2011, 12, 13 years, this is now essentially a 24-hour sprint race.
Yes.
They're pushing to the limits for 24-hour straights. The cars have developed in such a way that they can do it for the most part. That's why we also have some retirements, because some cars just won't last as long for different reasons. I mean, there's so much space for technical issues, so that happens sometimes, of course. So that's what one of the reasons I think we enjoy. It's just so much. It can be so much fun. There's so much racing, literally, for 24 hours. Last year, our experience was fun, but also partially traumatic.
Yes.
Because we did have was it 6 or 8 hour?
So I think it was a total over the whole 24 hours. It was 8 hours worth of safety car procedures. But we had one that was like a 6-hour long stint because it was raining through the night.
Yes.
And it was just not safe for people to race, which I agree with. But it's just hard to watch, like, just people going, I think, what is safety car speed? Maybe 80 kilometers?
Yes.
For going 6 hours, right?
Yes.
Going around and around and around.
Which is brutal because they are not allowed to overtake or anything, of course, during that time. So going into this race, I think, at least speaking for myself, I was a little bit nervous because you don't know what's going to happen. And before the race, I didn't look up the weather because I wanted to be surprised by it. Then once the race started, I looked into it and there was like a 10% chance of rain. So very, very minimal.
Yeah.
And I think that didn't set the tone, but that definitely influenced how this 24-hour race went.
Yes. Also, real quick, you have 3 drivers per car, and I think no driver is allowed to drive more than 14 hours. And I think then maybe there is, however, also a minimum drive time of 4 hours per driver.
And then you're also not allowed to drive more than 4 hours consecutively, I believe.
Yeah, something like this. So there are some rules around that, but essentially that is Le Mans for you.
Yes.
And so for me going into this race, I wasn't really worried about the safety car again because I was like, there's no way we're going to have 2 years in a row, 6 hours of that. The likelihood of that happening is very, very unlikely. And that's actually also what happened. We didn't get the first safety car until almost 12 hours into the race.
Which was shocking.
And it was also the only safety car.
Yes.
There are other things that they can do. So they can, if there's like an incident, because Le Mans is a very long track. So that means that they can implement something called a slow zone. So there's like certain parts of the track where you're only allowed to drive like 80 kilometers or they do a full course yellow. So again, speeds reduced to 80 kilometers. So you can do things like that to prevent a safety car from coming out. But an overall, over a 24-hour race distance, to have one safety car, that's actually very surprising. And you said something about like, oh, you know, the cars can't make it that long, or sometimes you have technical difficulties. But if you look at the cars in the hypercar category, only one car did not finish.
Yeah, I mean, we did have very little retirements.
Yes.
We did at the end have 1, 2, 3, 4,
We had
5,
7
6,
from
7,
the
8,
LMGT3 category.
12 vehicles ended up not finishing.
Yeah, but I think only one of those was from the hypercars because they are nowadays just really optimized.
I think
it was the Cadillac.
2 Cadillacs.
Oh, 2
actually.
Cadillacs. Very, very unfortunate. So going into that, so the start of the race, actually, the Cadillacs immediately kind of lost positions. They were not able to hold off the other cars. And then we had immediately at some point then, and this is sometimes really hard to gauge because people have different pitting strategies, but you had then the Ferraris in the front.
Yeah.
And it was a lockout in the front. So you had the number 50 and the number 51 Ferrari, which are the red ones, and those are the factory cars. And then you also had the 83 Ferrari, which is the yellow one, which is a customer car. However, they're all in the pits next to each other and they do share data with each other. However, it is always said that the factory Ferrari has preferential treatment over the customer car, and that they usually get more information compared to the customer car. And you also saw that throughout the race, there was essentially team orders coming in and be like, hey, I think it was the 83 was hunting down the 51, and it was like, listen, don't push. And then the other one was like, yeah, push and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of also like miscommunication, because in the end, you want to win, right?
Of course.
And in the end, it also is, you very rarely have, especially in the highest category, the hypercar, you have a customer car winning. So a customer car is essentially someone that is sponsoring the team. It's a private party, whereas you have like with Porsche or Cadillac, it's the factory itself, like it's backed by Ferrari. So that actually caused some really, really interesting situations throughout the race, because there was some squabbling on the radio where some driver was like, well, if he's gonna catch me, if you want him to pass me, then let him catch me,
which I think is a completely fair argument. As being in a position of the driver, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's like, if you're faster, then pass me.
Yeah.
I'm very much pro that. It's like, don't get on the radio and complain.
Yeah.
Pass me.
Do it.
And especially you had those situations because it happened more often between the 51 car towards the 83 car. It wasn't really much between the 50 and the 51 car. So I thought that created some really, really interesting situations.
Yes.
And overall, I'm trying to think. Oh,
well, I wanted to say the first, I think, big heartbreak for me for this year's Le Mans was, for the longest time in the LMGT3 category, the BMW WTR.
Yes.
Number 46 with the doctor, Valentino Rossi, was leading. They were leading for also quite a distance ahead. They had an excellent race. All the drivers were doing excellently.
It was between them and the Porsche, always back to back. Yeah.
Yes, but there was a point where they had driven out a little bit of a lead, so it felt like, maybe there is a chance for them to win, especially because I remember last year they crashed out, so they didn't finish the race. So I was hoping that this year they would be a little bit more successful. And of course, I'm a little bit partial to Valentino Rossi.
Absolutely.
And then, unfortunately, they had, I think it was technical issues.
I think it was a power failure.
Yeah, and then at one point we just saw them going through the gravel, stopping the car.
I think it was going into like T1 right out of the, right past the pits. And then, the car just like, they weren't able to recover it. And then really heartbreaking, the sister car, the other BMW, ended up hitting a rabbit that ended up causing them to... also not being able to finish the race, which, like, what are the chances of you hitting an animal?
Yes. Speaking of animals.
I was going to say, actually, maybe I should react it, because the big villains of this Le Mans and the big talking point were the bugs.
Yes.
And it was insane.
Insane. The visibility was bonkers. They had talked about it going into the race, and I was like, oh, that's interesting that bugs are,
and they kept bringing it up.
And they kept bringing it up, but then you saw it because they do have a lot of great camera footage from the driver's perspective on the inside of the car going out of the windshield, and there were points where the windshield was so dirty, everything looked blurry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane, especially at the speeds that they go, 300 plus kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
And you just see blurriness.
Yeah.
Of course, they're familiar with the track and they have GPS and everything, but still, you want to have the best visibility you can.
You're racing,
And then there's this windshield just covered in bugs. And then they were even talking about before the race that the drivers asked for more tear-offs.
Yeah.
But then the issue is the more tear-offs you have, the worse the visibility also gets, because they impact your visibility. So it was kind of like a catch-22 in a way. And the interesting thing was the bugs thing really almost lasted the entire race.
So during the night when it cooled off, that's when you didn't have that issue, because I guess the bugs were sleeping.
They're like, all right, let's take a break from bothering these guys.
But it's also insane because this is like, they obviously do practice and testing and stuff like that leading up to it. And so this whole week, they've been killing these bugs, And it's like, how many bugs are they? But apparently, and I don't know how true this is, apparently migration this year is late. So the birds are not there to help out.
Oh, interesting. I thought it might be also humidity and things like that, because the humidity level was quite high. And I thought maybe it has something to do with the weather. Because, of course, when it rains, I mean, this is old farmers' sayings, when it rains, there's not as many bugs. But before the rain, when the air pressure is there, it pushes everybody down. I'm not sure if this holds up to science, but I remember hearing that, I don't know if it's a wives' tale or like things like that. I was like, oh, this was an unexpected obstacle, I think.
Very much so.
So that was really interesting.
And I think one of the other obstacles, or one of the big themes this year, was because I want to get into a few teams that I wanted to talk about. And of course, we're going to talk about the race winners per category and stuff like that. But one of the big things this year is we didn't have a lot of safety cars, a few full course yellows, a few slow down, but
I know what you're getting at.
It was the amount of penalties that people were getting was insane.
And also for what? Speeding in the pit lane, yellow flag or slow zone infringement. So these are all penalties that are easily avoidable.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's just such silly mistakes, and they can be so costly because either you get a drive-through penalty, you get a 5-second stop and go penalty, 20, 60, 50-second stop and go penalty. So it costs. And it could potentially cost you the race, especially because there's so many cars still in the race. We didn't have that many retirements. So it was insane how after almost every yellow zone or a yellow flag area, we had our full course yellow. There was immediately afterwards like car, this, and this, and this having penalties. This is bonkers.
It is. And it was also at times it's so they also were talking about how you in the LMP2 category as well as in the LMGT3 category, you have more amateur racers. So you have either pro AMs or bronze drivers, and those drivers, I mean, the quality of driving is insane. So even like the bronze drivers they were talking about, they are considered amateurs, but if they would be driving in like car clubs and stuff like that, they would be winning like by half a mile ahead, half a lap ahead, because they're just, the quality is so good. But the people that got penalties was also like the elite drivers,
the professional, like the former F1 drivers, the reserve drivers.
Yeah, especially like Ferrari, the 50 and the 51 car, as if it was their job.
Yes,
they were collecting these penalties.
They were doing a bingo board, like who can get the most penalties but still get away with it or something.
Yes, it was insane, the amount of penalties. And at one point I thought it was quite ridiculous, and I understand that we get the radio messages a little bit later than it actually happens, but it's literally, I think the race engineer was telling Giovinazzi, don't do anything to compromise the race, just like stick to it. And then immediately like a minute later it says like 51 car gets a penalty, and then they got like back-to-back drive-through penalties. And it's as far as I'm understanding is that when you go through the pits, you obviously have the pit limiter, but what they do is they round up. So it means that you really have to be on top of your speed. Yeah. Because if not, you are going to get punished if you're trying to, trying too much to push. Yeah. And we saw a lot of that. And it's just like the commentators were also saying, it's like, it's better you lose a second on pit entry. Yes. But instead of losing, because I think a drive-through penalty will cost you about 34 seconds driving through pits, it's not worth it.
No, it's so not worth it. But let's go through the different categories. Do we want to start at the top or at the bottom?
Let's start with the LMGT3s.
Okay, gotcha.
So the team obviously that we were really looking out for are the Iron Danes.
Yes.
They are just, of course, like super popular, and they captured our hearts. However, it was very heartbreaking. The qualifying didn't go well for them. However, then the Iron Dames and the Manthey Porsche.
Before you get into that, let's take a little bit step back. Going into this weekend, it was already heartbreak with the Iron Dames.
Oh yeah,
double heartbreak. So first of all, for the Road to Le Mans, which is, I guess you could say, like a junior Le Mans event, the Marta Garcia and Vanya X were supposed to compete. However, Vanya had some health issues and she was recommended not to race, so that meant automatically the Marta Garcia couldn't race. So first heartbreak of the week. Second heartbreak of the week, on Saturday, the week before Le Mans, during testing, Michelle Gatting got the Porsche literally dropped on her foot, which fractured it, I think she said, in 6 places. Yeah. I mean, it was absolutely heartbreaking. It was supposed to be her 6th or 7th Le Mans.
I think 7th.
She's the gold driver, so she's the highest rated driver in their team. So, I mean, of course it's heartbreaking because Le Mans has such a special place in everybody's heart. So then she called Sarah Bovey, I mean, they're really close friends. And she also said she's the first driver she thought of. She called Sarah asking if she was free to race this week. And of course, Sarah was like, oh, haha, you're funny. I'm not racing. And then she was like, no, you have to. I broke my foot. And she's like, oh my gosh, yes, I'll be right there.
And also to like, if you have a minute, go ahead and look up how low those GT3 are. Because like the car that was dropped on her. So because I have a Porsche GT3, right? And it was dropped on her foot, and like there is so little space between it, and you have to keep in mind she was still partially in the car, and I think she was stepping out, and then the car dropped on her foot, right?
I don't know. I thought she was already out of the hood because there was a whole thing. They were doing a driver change. It was a little bit more
during
lax,
a red flag.
During a red flag, so they had a little bit more time. So the timing just was maybe a little bit off. She got out of the car a little bit too early before they had lowered the car. So when she got out, her foot was under or partially under the car. And then when they lowered it, one, the car is already lower for the Le Mans races. And then second, of course, when you lower the car, it goes a little bit lower.
Yeah, it drops and then it
drops
back
and then
up
it comes
with
back up. So all of the, I think 1,300 kilograms, so over a ton of weight went on her foot. She fell down. Rahel was like, what the fuck are you doing? Get up. Because she didn't realize what had happened. And then we found out that, Michelle was out of the race.
Yeah, absolutely heartbreaking. So then going into qualifying, they didn't have a good qualifying session. However, the Porsche is in general, so the Porsche, the Manthe car, as well as them, they're the lightest car on the track. So you can make up some time due to pit strategy. And then the Iron Dames were doing really well. At some point, they were running on 4th, then in 7th. It kind of like the pendulum swings. And
but they were in the top 10 because they had made up at least 6 positions because they started, I think, in 16th.
Yeah. And then you obviously also had some people falling out of the race and stuff like that. So you're gaining positions that way. And then you had this situation. I can't even remember how far that was in, but I remember it was the 87 Lexus motherfuckers, right? That ended up coming actually in 5th place. In a move that was never on. I think it is the first chicane after the long straight. Trying to sneak in through the right side, and then just tapping the Iron Dames. Then in a way also, like, first of all, the move was never on. They ended up getting a drive-through penalty for that. But also the repercussions for the Iron Dames on that one is, first of all, Rahel Frey, who was in a car, ends up getting trapped in the gravel.
Yes.
And also in such an annoying way because it's just like the front tire that's trapped in there, but you don't have enough traction to back out of it. Yeah. So then they had to, there was then a full course yellow. Then the crane has to come and get them, lift them up, put them back in. And then, however, the issues continued. You know, she was able to start the car back up. They come in, I think she comes into the pits. They check the car. No. I think it stopped again.
They continued. She was able to continue racing and already losing, of course, a couple positions at that point.
Yes, I think they dropped back to 10th at that point.
Yeah. So then, but she was back in the race, which was like, oh, okay, they can make up time because there was still a lot of time
I think it was like
racing.
12 hours left. Or
yeah. So there was still a good amount of time racing left, and then just a couple laps after. Rahel had to pull over to the side because she couldn't shift anymore. The shifter wouldn't work. So then she had to pull over. There was another yellow, but then she made it into the pits, and then their crew worked so fast. They were able to fix it within a couple of minutes, but then a couple of minutes still costs you so much time. So by the time she went back out, there were 6 laps down from the top driver in her category. So it was already heartbreaking. However, they did end up coming in last, but they've competed, I think, now at 7 Le Mans, and they finished all of the 7 Le Mans. And I think that is a huge feat.
And it's also this thing, like, they interviewed Sarah Bovey beforehand, and I was like, oh my God, you should have never said this, because she said that, and this is true, the Iron Dames are very good at staying out of trouble.
Yes.
Like, they're not someone...
I thought that too when I heard that. I was like, oh no.
When I heard her say that, it was like, this is 12 hours too early to be saying that. Say that in the post-race interview.
Yes.
And then literally, I think, like, within the hour of that happening. And then once again, this is not the Iron Dames' fault. You know, this was not Rahel's making a mistake or anything like that. This is the 87 Lexus trying to make a move that was never on. I don't know if it was like the bronze car that was in, the bronze driver that was in it. It happens. People think there's a gap when there isn't, but it's so frustrating when you see the aftermath for the other team, right?
Yes.
And then you end up coming fifth. I mean, they're gonna be like, "Hey, I'm fifth," right?
Yeah.
But it's very frustrating, especially for Iron Dames fans, because being even like 3 laps down, 6 laps down, whatever it is, like you're not going to recover from that, because this would mean that you would need 6 safety cars and you would have to be, for whatever reason, ahead of your team leader to unlap yourself.
Yeah,
because essentially every time you unlap yourself, you make up 1 lap.
Yeah,
right?
but it's also like a lap is 3+ minutes. I think it's like 3.5.
It's almost 4 minutes for the LMGT3s.
Exactly. So that's like, it's so much time to make up.
Yeah, it's 3.55.
So it was definitely a little bit heartbreaking there. Congratulations, however, to the Manthai first team who had come in first again. They've won now back to back. That's the number 92 Porsche. The driver Leeds, Austrian driver who put it in the final laps. He has now won an incredible 6th time at Le Mans, which is bonkers.
It's insane, yeah.
He did say like winning it back to back is very special.
Of course.
You know, but it's also like 6 times winning a 24-hour race. I mean, first of all, that you competed 6 times is what a feat.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, he's competed more than 6 times, but like,
of course, but then winning it 6 times, and the thing about it is, like, in 24 hours, so much can happen. I think if you look at the Le Mans 2023 race, there were so many DNFs and so many driver mistakes. It's like, and so many like mechanical failures and stuff like that. And there's so much heartbreak that can happen. So I mean, yeah, big props to them. I'm also, of course, very excited that a Porsche won.
Yes.
I'm very excited about that.
Of course.
Because
We're very partial to Porsche.
Yes, very much so. So going to the LMP2s. With the LMP2s is the category, in my opinion, that is like the middle child.
Yes, 100%.
It is literally the middle child because they're the middle fastest, right? And I feel like they get the least amount of attention in the broadcast.
I feel like this year especially, I felt last year not as much.
Yeah.
But I did notice a difference this year for sure.
I honestly think they should do a second broadcast and to give the other categories more attention, because the hypercars getting all the attention, but there's obviously a lot of racing that's happening in the other categories. And
because also the LMP2s have it tricky because they are getting lapped by the hypercars, but they are lapping the LMGT3 cars. So they have different types of traffic to deal with. They're still incredibly fast also.
And with the LMP2s, they all essentially drive the same car.
Yes, there's like a one-make championship essentially.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it has happened before that the LMP2 has won the overall Le Mans race. So this is technically a possibility. It's very rarely.
Yes.
In this race, it was also that you had actually all of the categories kind of stick with each other.
For most of the race, yeah.
Yes. So at no point an LMP2 car was essentially ahead of a hypercar or a GT3 car was ahead.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting. However, the big heartbreak, I would say, for the LMP2s was the IDEC Sport team.
Yes.
So one of the teams is actually, one of the cars, the number 18 car, is where Jamie Chadwick is driving in. Jamie Chadwick
won Indy Next race last year. That's how she came on our radar. She was the W Series champion prior to that. So the league prior to F1 Academy was the W Series for the women.
And then she also has now, leading up to this, she has won 2 back-to-back ELMS races. And I think in the ELMS, they actually race hypercars. They don't race the LMP2s.
Yes.
They have, so the ELMS is the European Le Mans Series, which they have the hypercars. And then within the hypercars, they also have the Pro AMs racing. So essentially bronze car drivers to essentially give amateur drivers or less seasoned drivers the opportunity to get used to racing in hypercars. And so she's one of them, and they were doing really, really well.
Yes.
Until one of the wheels popped off, and that was the end of the race. And then we had the number 28 IDEC Sport car, who was actually battling for the win, and they ended up having the same thing. A wheel popped off.
Yes.
I don't know if it was human failure or if it was mechanical failure. But it's so heartbreaking. You saw the people in the pits, and they're obviously all crying because there's so much blood and tears
Yeah.
that goes into this and
Ugh.
sweat. Blood,
I mean,
sweat, and
I'm
tears.
already
Yeah.
crying during these races, and I have no personal
Skin in the game.
Yeah,
really.
none at all. Like
just
nothing.
like passion for the
Yes.
sport, right? And so it was really, really heartbreaking to
Yes.
see that, that's just racing. That's
Yeah.
the nature of racing,
Mhm.
you know. But it was very heartbreaking to see that happening. To see the car stranded in the gravel, and they're not able to bring it back into the race.
Yeah.
And then to see also the reaction of the pits, the engineers and the mechanics.
Yes.
Just like a lot of people in tears, because like it just fucking sucks, dude,
Yeah,
you
it
know?
truly does. And then there was also some big action or
Mm-hmm.
upset at the end because Inter-Europol, the winner from last year, was leading, and then they got a last-minute penalty.
And it was the rookie too, I think.
I don't know. I don't remember what his rating was, but yeah, he got a last-minute penalty, and I think it was another situation where he was just warned, like, don't make any mistakes now. He made a mistake, got a penalty.
It was track limits.
Oh, it was track limits. Okay.
Yeah.
And then VDS Panis Racing, a French team, ended up being in the lead. They ended up taking the lead. However, then they got some
And
car
this was
trouble.
all within like 20 minutes to go.
No, it was literally
10
within the last
minutes, yeah.
2-3 laps, which is
Yeah.
the last 10 minutes, essentially. So then Panis Racing, who had never won, they've been in LMP2 or in Le Mans for many, many years, had been on the podium for many times. They were on pole, and then they had some car trouble, and then they lost just seconds after seconds after seconds. So Interpol ended up passing them again, coming in first, winning for the second time back to back. It's a Polish team. So that was really exciting for them. Heartbreak for Panis Racing, of course. And it's hard, sometimes a little bit hard for me to understand, but I think it's because I'm not in that position. Well, I guess maybe as an athlete you can maybe understand it, but it's how much heartbreak there is for being second.
Yeah.
Instead of, and I'm sure maybe it's like in that first moment when you're like, you almost had it. And then for Panis Racing, it wasn't a driver mistake. It was like a technical issue, which caused them to end up losing the win. But it's just like that you're
You're so devastated over the second one.
Yes.
Because I get it. Le Mans happens once a year,
Yes.
right? And then everything is on the line, and then you're this close, but you're still not close enough to win. And that is very, very heartbreaking. And it's I get it. Sometimes I'm like, bro, just you came second. Isn't that awesome?
I mean, it's huge. Second at Le Mans in your category.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a huge feat because not only few people have the opportunity or can afford to compete at Le Mans, and then that you made it all 24 hours, and then you came in on second. It's huge. But then again, yes, part of me understands it, but part of me is also just like, maybe it just takes a couple of days, and then they're like, wow,
probably
we
in that
came in
very
second.
moment, because a lot of times the drivers are interviewed directly when they come out of
I
the
know
car.
they get bombarded right
It's
after.
like, I'm sure you feel quite sore about it. I will also want to point out is that throughout the whole race, every driver only gets 4 track infringements. So that means 4 times they can essentially cut the track, whether it's on purpose or not.
Yeah.
And then after the 4th one, you get a penalty immediately. And it could also be, and this has happened during this race and also in other WEC races, is that you could have infringed like 4 times on track limits, and then you get out of the car, and then the guy taking over for you, or woman, or whoever takes over for you, they then have to serve your penalty.
Yeah, which is also
This
frustrating.
happened because I think that happened in the Toyota that Kobayashi is driving in, because Kobayashi got a bunch of penalties, and then he had to, or he did a lot of infringements, and then the guy taking over for him had to serve his penalty, which is also incredibly frustrating, because I'm like, dude, I just got in the car, and I already have to do this.
I know.
Yes. So now
moving on to the hypercars.
We had, in the end, let's just say who won. It was the number 83 AF Course Ferrari with Robert Kubica, former Formula 1 driver. Finally won. He has won in Le Mans in an LMP2 car before, but he has never won the overall race or in a hypercar. Last year, they obviously came closer to it. This is now the 3rd year back-to-back where we have a Ferrari winning.
All 3 times where it was a different Ferrari.
It was a different Ferrari. I think it was first the 50, then it was the 51, and now it's the 83 car. And I think it's especially impressive also what Robert did yesterday.
Yes.
Because in case you don't know, Robert had I'm saying Robert like I know him, right?
Of
Kubica.
course.
He, in 2012, he had a really bad rally racing accident where he ended up they weren't able to get him out of the car for almost a whole hour, which almost also cost him his life. And they had to do a partial amputation of his right arm. And so that means when you see him racing in a car, he actually does a lot of the driving only with his left arm.
Just
so
wild.
He has a very soft grip on his right arm.
I mean, you can also see it. I was paying attention to it once he got out of the car.
Yeah.
Like he holds his arm differently.
Yes.
And there's clearly not as much strength and movement possible with that other arm. But it's just incredible.
So, yeah.
Continue.
And then so in 2012 he had that accident. In 2019 he actually came back to F1, drove for Williams, and then he made the move over to the hypercars. And they I guess the customer car really wanted him in the car. And yesterday he was doing so incredibly well that at the end there was like he had already done a huge stint, and then they were like, hey, can you just do another 2.5 hours and finish the race? Because his race pace was so good, because with the hypercars you had a lot of times you do 2 stints and then you do the tire change. But Kubica was so good with the car, and the car was in general just, I guess, really well set up that they were able to do triple stints on the tires. Essentially then ended up forcing the other Ferraris, who were all battling for 2 and 3 at a time as well, to do triple stints on their tires, especially putting them in a bad position because they weren't expecting to do triple stints, so they were pushing a lot more on a tire, and that ended up costing them, I think, also a position in the end. But it was just really awesome to see him do so well. Yeah. And just really, because there was some squabbling. I mentioned that earlier on the radio with him and other drivers in general from the 83 car. There was like, hey, like, let me race, you know, let me do this and stuff like that. And so it's really awesome to see them now reap the fruits. Yes. Of the success. Also, obviously, what a feat by Ferrari to do it 3 times in a row now. Then we also had in second place, which I thought was very surprising, because I thought for the longest time the Ferrari was going to have
a lockout on the podium.
Lockout in the front because they were so dominant. We had the number 6 Porsche Penske sneak into the second place, and it was a 14-second gap to first place. So I don't think first place was ever on for them. But I'm very happy to see them get in there. Well, not only
I'm excited to see the Porsche in there, so it's not quite as dominated by Ferrari. I mean, I love Ferrari, don't get me wrong, but I like it to keep it interesting. But also, they had a really poor starting position on qualifying, and I think they had made up an incredible amount of positions pretty early on. I think it was also Kevin Estre who ended up finishing the race, who had made this incredible climb up the grid pretty early on. I think they started in 16th or something like that. I correct me if I'm wrong. I think you're looking it up right now.
It's unfortunately they don't show that.
Oh, that's such a bummer. But it was so, I mean, how great it was that they made that, first of all, climb throughout, and then they were able to keep up with the Ferraris, because they were talking about that the Ferrari car was still, they had a better pace. They were just overall stronger, but it worked out because the Porsche Penske also did less pits, which I think worked out in their favors. Yeah. They ended up doing 31 pits. The 83 Ferrari did 32 pits, but then the 50 did 33, and then the 51 did 35 pits, which I think is probably the thing that ended up costing them the second place or the podium lockout. But yeah, I'm very excited. But that was exactly the reason, because they had interviewed Kevin afterwards, and then he was just so devastated to be second. And like you said, I don't think first place was really on. No. really not at any point. I think during the race.
I didn't see it. Obviously, we don't have the intel that they have.
Yes.
But I didn't think
it
was ever on. I thought 2. I thought for a while, I thought maybe 3.
Yeah.
But then to come second was already very surprising. It did also, of course, benefit that both the 50 and the 51 car at the end were nursing a problem.
They did. They nursed the problem so that they take it slow. And it seemed quite urgent because they constantly heard over the radio. We heard the engineer like, hey, take it slow. And they also guaranteed the 51 with Antonio Giovinazzi at the moment. They said like the place is secure, like the positions are frozen. It's 51 and then 50 the Ferrari, so you don't have to battle each other.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that both cars make it back at the end or cross the finish line, because I mean the points still count for the overall championship, because it's not just Le Mans, it's part of a overall championship.
Yeah, the World Endurance Championship.
Yeah, but it was really exciting. I was really happy that the Porsche made it on there. I was rooting for them at the end. It was a little touch and go because there was definitely still a chance until the Ferrari announced that they were having issues. I was also for a very long time rooting for the Toyota, especially the number 8 with Sebastian Buemi. I mean, he has especially caught your heart this year. And he had a really good race, and they were competing very far up top for a long time, and then I went to sleep for 4.5 hours, and I came back and he was suddenly in 16th.
Yeah.
But they also, I think they lost the tire at some point. There was some issues.
Yeah.
Oh, that was, I think, also during your mini power nap.
Yes.
Couch nap. So that was really unfortunate because.
And I think one of the Ferraris, they also had a spin in the pits.
Well, they had, the number 50 had a spin right after exiting the pits, I think it was. So that cost them a little bit of time.
Yeah.
But I was, I'm glad, like I said, that the Porsche is in the mix now, because we do have a lot more manufacturers now competing in the hypercars, which is exciting, and more. There's a potential that McLaren will join sooner than later, because apparently the commentators were saying that now that McLaren is doing better in F1. They said that was a requirement for them to join the hypercars, which I think is completely fair. And as we know, if you're watching Formula One, they're doing excellent at the moment. So there's also lots of money coming in for them. So money to invest into the hypercar. So that was really exciting.
Especially because they are most likely going to win back-to-back at least Constructors' Championships.
Yes, 100%.
I would be very surprised if they don't at least win the Constructors' Championship this year.
But so we have Ferrari, we have Porsche, we have Cadillac, we have Toyota, we have Alpine, we have Peugeot, we have now Aston Martin again with the Valkyrie are in there. BMW, those are all the competitors we have in hypercar, solely in hypercar at the moment, which is really exciting.
I will say, so what the struggle was also for the Toyota and the Peugeots and stuff like that is that they didn't have the straight line speed. And
there's lots of straight lines at Le Mans.
Le Mans has a lot of
mostly straight lines.
Yeah, it's a lot of straights.
Or high-speed corners.
Yeah, and so that ended up costing them a lot. I will say I was a little disappointed because leading up to this, in the Imola race and in the Spa race, we did have quite a competitive field. So I was hoping that the Peugeots and the Alpines would be able to dabble in the front a lot more than they were actually ended up doing. So which was a little bit of a disappointment.
Yeah.
I also found out is that the Valkyrie, the hypercar, that they are not able or allowed to make major changes to the car up until they've completed 6 races. So right now they're really just racing like, I know that I think they're able to like switch like the downforce and stuff like that, but I think they're not able to make big changes to like the engines and stuff like that, because one of the regulations is if you join the WEC, you are locked in for 6 races in your setup. So essentially you're just gathering data.
Okay.
So they have to do 2 more races. So after the Lone Star Le Mans race in September in the US, then they're going to be able to make changes to the car afterwards.
Gotcha. Well, but the good thing was we had 2 Aston Martins competing at Le Mans for the first time in a long, long time. And we're also talking about, which I thought was really interesting, that they had to reverse engineer the car to put it together. But then they both finished the race. They completed all 24 hours of the race. The 009 came in 13th, and then the 007 came in 15th, which I think is already a really big feat. So I think they can be really happy with that. And then speaking of long endurance races, if you missed Le Mans and then for whatever reason, because we hyped it up, you are excited about endurance races, there's the next 3 weekends have 24-hour races as well. So there's so many 24 hours available for you, or so many 24-hour races available for you. So in case you're interested.
Well, you have Nürburgring?
We have Nürburgring coming up. We have Imola coming up. And then we have...
24 hours of Imola?
Or I don't know if it's Imola 24 hours, but we have 3 back-to-back 24-hour
races, or is it 24-hour races?
It's 24-hour races.
Interesting. Wow, that's crazy. Because I know the WEC is returning on July 13th for 6 hours of Sao Paulo.
Yes.
So that's cool because I actually really like the track. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, because they were talking about it, that some of the drivers, not all the drivers, but I think
Imola is in 3 weeks, or because Michelle is like, I'm going to be racing.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Come what will, I will race.
Exactly, she said that. But yeah, I know there's 3 weekends now back to back, or back to back to back. There will be 24-hour races, which is insane. I don't think I'll be watching the next 3 24-hour races.
No, I mean, to be honest, I would be interested in watching the Nürburgring because I think the Nordschleife itself is also such a special track.
Yes, 100%.
But I can't do it. Like, dude, I'm older now. I'm in my 30s. But it's also like, I mean, it didn't help that leading up to the 24-hour Le Mans race, I only got like 4 to 5 hours of bad sleep because like stupid fucking helicopter annoying the hell out of me.
Yeah.
So that, but like honestly, I'm also not built that way. You know? This was, I mean, I was at some point, when you went to bed, I was standing a lot.
Oh, fair.
I was just walking like back and forth in front of the TV because every time I sat down, all of a sudden I got really comfortable.
Yeah,
you know?
which makes sense. Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was overall it was a good race. It was not the most exciting race.
No.
It was definitely it's a balance compared to last year's race.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm definitely curious for next year. I took some notes because we were thinking about doing a bingo for next year just to keep it also entertaining for us when we're watching it. Hopefully we will be doing a live stream hangout watch party next year. We'll see what our circumstances are then. But I'm thinking about creating a bingo board because I think that would be fun and just entertaining because there's so many things that could happen that can be just a little added fun factor.
The last thing I wanted to say is, and this maybe also will help us transition into the next topic, is that I think one of the really standout performances is also the Ferrari strategy team. They've been doing incredibly well because like due to their strategy and of course the driving, they were able to also coming from like back positions all the way to the front, right? They were 1 through 4 essentially. You had Ferraris on the front and they were doing so well, which I always think it's so surprising that the F1 Ferrari team is not trying to get any of their guys or girls, you know?
I agree. I would say, I think this is a great transition. And then to find out more about that, tune in tomorrow, just because this is already a very long episode. So we're even on Spotify, we're just going to split it up. And if you tune in tomorrow, or when you tune in tomorrow, we'll talk all about the Formula One race as well as the F1 Academy race. So tune in for that if you want to hear shit talk F1 strategy, specifically Ferrari tomorrow.
Yes. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.